Stop searching, start seeing. Dharma awakening. In a quiet corner of the world, far from the cities and their noise, there lived a man named Lucas. Born without sight, he had never seen a sunrise, never traced the lines of a face, never known color beyond what he imagined in dreams. And yet, Lucas was not bitter. From an early age, he believed he had a purpose, a destiny beyond the darkness that surrounded him. "You were born without sight," his mother once whispered, "but that only means the world you'll see will be different, perhaps deeper." Those words stayed with him, but as he grew older, hope began to wane. Lucas searched relentlessly, not for riches or fame, but for sight. Not just physical vision, but the promise of some inner light, something that would illuminate the truth of this life and why he had been born the way he was. He journeyed far and wide, moving from village to village, from temples to retreats, meeting monks, mystics, and self-proclaimed sages. Some told him to chant mantras, others sold him talismans. A few offered silence, but most offered promises that never came true. One seer told him, "You were cursed in a past life. If you repay your karmic debt, you will see again." So Lucas fasted, walked barefoot 4 miles, gave away all he had. Still, the world remained dark. Years passed, his beard grew long, his body thin. He began to believe that perhaps the light was never meant for him, that perhaps the search itself had been his illusion. One day, after a long and fruitless journey through a dense forest, Lucas arrived at a small mountain village tucked away like a forgotten prayer. The village had a modest temple, nothing ornate, nothing grand, just stone steps worn smooth by time, and the faint sound of bells echoing in the morning mist. There, an old monk named Master Ansel lived alone. Lucas asked the villagers about him. "He barely speaks," one said. "He grows vegetables, teaches no one, accepts no students," said another. Still, Lucas climbed the temple steps. At the top, he knelt and waited. Hours passed, then without a word, a cup of warm tea was placed in his hands. He could smell jasmine. "You've come a long way," the monk said gently. Lucas bowed low. "I've come looking for light. I've searched everywhere, and I've found nothing." There was silence, the kind that stretches like a deep breath held by the earth itself. Then Ansel spoke. "Maybe it's time to stop searching and start seeing." Lucas furrowed his brow. "But I can't see. I'm blind." "Perhaps not the way most people do," the monk replied, "but I've known many who have eyes wide open and yet are completely blind to life. They search endlessly, grasping for answers, all while stepping over truth that lies at their feet." Lucas stayed the night, then the next. Days became weeks, but Master Ansel offered no teachings, no rituals, no magical chants. Instead, he gave Lucas tasks. Clear the leaves in the courtyard, chop vegetables for the noon meal, fill the water jars. Lucas obeyed, reluctantly at first. This was not what he expected from a spiritual master. "I didn't come here to sweep," he once said, frustrated. "I came to awaken." Ansel simply smiled. "Awakening often hides in ordinary moments. You just don't recognize it yet." At dawn, Lucas was asked to sit in silence. At dusk, he listened to the bell that marked the passing of time. There were no deep discussions about enlightenment, no debates about karma or rebirth, only the rhythm of a simple life. And slowly, something began to shift. Lucas started to notice things he had never paid attention to before. The way the wind moved through bamboo leaves, the warmth of the sun on his skin, the way silence held space for everything and nothing. One morning, while sweeping the courtyard, he paused. A single bird was singing in the tree above. He had heard birds before, of course, but this time he felt it, not just the sound, but the aliveness behind it. He sat down, breath caught in his chest. In that moment, he realized he had been chasing something he thought existed outside of himself, a flash of light, a grand vision, but what he truly yearned for was not to see the world. He wanted to feel connected to it, to stop being a seeker, and simply be. That evening, he approached the old monk. "I think I understand," he said. "I've been chasing something I already had." Ansel nodded. "The Buddha said, 'What you are is what you have been. What you will be is what you do now.'" You were so busy searching for sight that you forgot to see your own presence. Lucas smiled for the first time in years. It was a smile not born from achievement, but from surrender, from stillness, from the quiet joy of finally being home. Even if nothing around him had changed, he still could not see the sunrise, but for the first time he no longer needed to. He felt the morning through bird song and breeze. He touched peace in the stillness of the stone beneath his feet. And in the absence of light, he discovered the presence of truth. The seasons changed slowly on the mountain. Spring melted into summer, and Lucas remained at the temple, not because he hoped to gain something, but because for the first time in his life, he felt like he had nothing left to chase. Gone were the restless nights of questioning. Gone was the anxiety of measuring progress on a spiritual path. Now Lucas simply lived, sweeping leaves, preparing simple meals, listening to the songs of birds he could never see but somehow recognize by soul. Master Ansel never praised him, never scolded him, never pushed or pulled. He simply was a quiet, steady presence that mirrored the stillness Lucas was slowly learning to embrace. One morning, after sitting in meditation for what felt like hours, Lucas heard the monk approach. "Do you feel lighter now?" Ansel asked softly. Lucas opened his palms and whispered, "I don't feel lighter. I feel clearer." The monk chuckled. "Good. Clarity is not weightless. It just makes you aware of what you're no longer carrying." There was no dramatic moment, no thunderbolt of realization, just small shifts, like a river carving stone. And then something happened that Lucas did not expect. One of the temple's young apprentices had fallen ill. Feverish and weak, the boy lay in a small room, barely speaking. The local villagers, fearing infection, kept their distance. But Lucas entered the room without hesitation. He sat beside the boy, held his hand, wiped his forehead with damp cloth. For 3 nights he did not leave. He whispered stories of the wind, of the trees, of the stars he had never seen but often dreamed about. And the boy began to heal. On the 4th morning, Master Ansel came in and found Lucas asleep, his hand still holding the child's. "You didn't have to stay," the monk said gently. Lucas replied without opening his eyes. He needed someone to be with him, not do something for him. Ansel stood silent for a moment, then finally spoke. "Do you know what you just described?" Lucas sat up. "That is compassion," said the monk. "Not the desire to fix, but the willingness to be present with pain without needing to escape it." Lucas thought for a moment, then smiled. "I guess I've finally begun to see." But that smile faded when a message arrived 2 days later. A traveling team of doctors had reached the village at the base of the mountain. They had new techniques, surgical methods that could potentially restore sight to people who had been blind since birth. When they heard about Lucas, they sent word, "If he comes within the next 10 days, we'll examine him for free." The news spread fast. The villagers were thrilled. "This is your chance," they said. "You've prayed your whole life for this." Even the young boy Lucas had cared for tugged at his sleeve and said, "You have to try, Uncle Lucas. You deserve it." And yet, Lucas did not move. He sat that night with Master Ansel in the garden under the moonless sky. "Are you afraid?" the monk asked. "No," Lucas replied quietly. "I'm not afraid of seeing. I'm afraid of forgetting how much I've already seen." There was a long pause. The monk, for once, had no answer. Lucas continued, "What if I go and it doesn't work, or worse, what if it does work? What if I open my eyes and lose what I've gained in the dark?" Ansel finally spoke. "That's a question only you can answer. But ask yourself this: is the light you seek outside your body or already within your mind?" Lucas didn't sleep that night. He sat in the temple's main hall, listening to the echo of his breath. By dawn, he made his decision. He would not go. The villagers were shocked. Some called him foolish, others angry. A few accused him of pride. "You're wasting a miracle," they cried. "Do you think you're better than the rest of us who would give anything for that chance?" Lucas answered gently, "I searched for decades for a light I thought would change my life. But now that I've found peace within, I don't want to risk trading it for noise." The arguments didn't stop. Some said he was delusional. Others said he was enlightened, but Lucas simply returned to his quiet work, sweeping, cooking, listening. Later that week, the doctors came up the mountain, curious to meet the man who had refused their gift. When they asked him why, he smiled and said, "Because the clarity I've found doesn't come from the eyes, it comes from seeing that I am already whole." They looked at him, this blind man who seemed more centered than anyone they'd ever met, and said nothing. What was there to say? Before leaving, one doctor asked, "Do you ever wonder what the world looks like?" Lucas replied, "No, I wonder more if the world ever stops to feel itself." And in that moment, even the wind paused to listen. Several years passed on the mountain. Lucas had become something of a legend, not because he had done anything spectacular, but because of how completely he had surrendered to simplicity. Villagers still came with questions. Pilgrims sometimes climbed the stone steps just to sit quietly beside him. He never claimed to be a teacher, never gave sermons. He only listened, and when the moment called for it, he spoke with the same calm as the mountain wind. One afternoon, a young woman named Elsie arrived from a distant city. Her eyes were weary, her mind restless. She had read every spiritual book she could find, studied under famous gurus, flown across continents, meditated in deserts, and yet something in her still trembled. "I've been searching for awakening for 10 years, she confessed, sitting with Lucas beneath a Bodhi tree. "Everywhere I go, they tell me I'm getting closer, but I'm exhausted. What am I missing?" Lucas turned his face toward her. "Maybe," he said gently, "you're not missing anything. Maybe you're just refusing to stop and look." Elsie stared at him. "How can you say that? You're blind?" He smiled. "Yes, and that's why I had to learn to see differently." She fell silent. Lucas continued, "Do you know why people don't find awakening even when it's right in front of them? Because they keep looking for something dramatic, a flash of light, a booming voice, a vision of God. But awakening is not a performance. It's the absence of seeking." Elsie frowned. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "Stop chasing," he whispered. "Start noticing." He took her hand and placed it over her heart. "Start here. This is where Dharma begins." Elsie didn't speak for a long time, but something in her eyes shifted. Later that week, she cut her return ticket. She chose to stay. One morning, while walking near the base of the mountain, Lucas stumbled and injured his ankle. Villagers helped carry him back to the temple. The doctor who examined him was a man from the past, one of the very physicians who had once offered him sight. "I remember you," the doctor said. "You refused surgery years ago." Lucas smiled. "Still refusing." The doctor studied him curiously. "But why? I must ask again. We've made even more progress now. The odds are stronger than ever." Lucas turned to the window. "Can I tell you a secret?" The doctor nodded. "I once prayed every night for my sight to be restored. I begged the heavens. I would have traded anything for it." He paused. "But now I pray for nothing, and yet I see everything." The doctor leaned forward. "You really don't want to know what color the sky is, or the faces of the people who love you." Lucas breathed in the warm scent of the trees outside. "But I do know them. I've felt the sky in the breeze that greets me each morning. I've seen the kindness in people's voices, in their hesitation before they speak, in the silence they leave behind when they go. Do you really think color can add more to that?" The doctor said nothing. A week later, during a village gathering, a traveling monk spoke loudly to the crowd. "Why do you all treat this man like a sage? He refuses healing. He clings to blindness. He's romanticized his suffering." Some nodded in agreement. Others looked down, unsure, but one voice rang out. It was Elsie. "He didn't refuse healing," she said. "He just accepted a deeper kind of vision, one we're all too busy to even notice." The monk scoffed. What could he possibly teach that others haven't already said? And this time Lucas stood. He walked slowly to the center of the gathering, guided not by sight, but by awareness. And then he spoke. "I don't teach," he said softly. "I remember." Everyone leaned in. "I remember what it was like to search for something outside myself. I remember the ache of always being almost there. I remember thinking I was broken." He placed a hand over his chest. "But then I stopped, and I began to listen, to the birds, to the wind, to my own breath. And in that stillness, I realized the light I longed for wasn't lost. I had just been looking for it in the wrong direction. He turned slightly, letting the wind play with his robe. People ask me why I won't open my eyes, but I ask you, have you opened your heart? A silence fell. Not empty, full. After the gathering, a young child approached him shyly. Master Lucas, will I ever see the truth like you do? Lucas knelt, smiling. You already are. Every time you pause to feel, instead of rush to know, every time you listen with your heart, you're seeing more clearly than most. The boy hugged him. Lucas hugged back. Years later, after Lucas passed away peacefully in his sleep, the temple elders built a small stone marker under the Bodhi tree. It read, "He stopped searching, and so he began to see." Pilgrims still visit, not to worship, but to sit, to be still, to stop searching. And sometimes if they listen carefully, they hear a whisper in the wind. Start here. This is where Dharma begins.